With AutoPlay Media Studio 5.0, you can create your own multi-state button objects. Let's take a look at how we do that. So we're going to create our raw button starting here in Adobe Photoshop. We'll create a normal button in this lesson and a toggle button in the next lesson. So go to File, New, press OK, select any size document, make sure it's at 100%, and then create a shape. In our case, we're going to go ahead and work with a rectangular shape. You can create any size or shape button that you like, and I'm going to apply a basic style to that shape. So I've got a preset style from my style palette. I'm going to double click the layer effect icon to come into the layer effects area here, and I'm going to tweak the drop shadow a bit, and this is just for the purposes of this tutorial for you guys so you can see it. I know that sometimes when I compress this video it gets a little bit light, so if it looks a little dark to you, don't worry about it. You can create your own a little bit lighter, but I just wanted to make sure everybody can see it. Okay, so that's our button layer. I'm going to go ahead and name that layer button, and then I'm going to create a duplicate of it, and I'm going to create the duplicate, I'm going to rename the duplicate down. I'm going to double click on this duplicate layer, come into the drop shadow area, and disengage this Use Global Light checkbox, press OK, and create 2 more copies of that layer. So we've got 4 total, and I'm going to name these copies Over and Disabled. Okay, we disabled that global light function so we wouldn't affect the shadows of the other layers when we're editing shadows for given layers. So let's go ahead and turn them all off except for the down layer, and we'll double click on the layer effects icon and come in here. First thing we'll do is shorten our drop shadow a little bit, and we'll increase the size of it so it gets a little bit more blurry, and we will also increase the opacity slightly. So if we use our preview button to toggle the effect, we can kind of see what we're doing here and get it set up just the way we want. So it looks like the button is being pushed down somewhat. Okay, we're creating an optical illusion that the button has been pushed down. Alright, let's go ahead and put a color overlay layer on there. We'll set this to black, and we'll just put the opacity at 2%, and then we can go ahead and see, yep, that darkens it, and it looks just right. We'll press OK. We'll turn off that layer, and we'll turn on our over layer. I'll double click the effects icon. Now we're going to do the opposite. We're going to lengthen the drop shadow a bit, and I'm going to decrease the opacity of it a bit, so that looks like our button is sort of rising up. And again, I'm just using the preview toggle here, radio box, to toggle my changes and make sure that I'm getting the right effect that I wanted here. There we go, that looks more like it. I'm going to go ahead and put on a color overlay layer, set it to white, choose overlay as the blending mode, and back it off to somewhere around 25%. Now I'm going to just move this down. We'll preview that. That looks great. It looks like the button is popping up a little bit, which is exactly what we want. I'll go ahead actually and just create a little bit of an increase in the size of the drop shadow and press OK. So that's our over layer. Now our disabled layer, we're going to go ahead and do the same thing. We'll go into the effects area. We'll take a drop shadow and back it off right to the minimum like that. And then we're going to put a color overlay layer set to white, but this time we're going to set the blending mode to saturation. Okay, so it's going to be grayed out. We'll press OK, and now what we're going to do is go ahead and add an empty layer on top of each button shape layer. We're going to merge with these layers, and that's going to turn into pixel data, the layer effect data. So we're rasterizing these layers essentially. So we're going to go through and with each button shape layer, link it to the layer on top of it, the empty layer you just created, and press Ctrl E to merge them down. And this is going to convert everything into pixel data, and we can go ahead and export our button images now. So let's go ahead and take the Move tool, that's this arrow, and we'll Control click onto our button layer, then we'll hold down Control Shift, and we'll click on all the other layers, the over, down, and disabled layers. This is going to create one selection that encompasses all the pixel data in our image. Now when we crop to, so that's image, crop, we get a size image which is equal to the pixel data from all 4 layers. Okay, I'll turn off our background layer, and then one at a time we're going to export these layers. So nothing is turned on except our button layer. I'm going to go to Save for Web, so that's File, Save for Web, and I'm going to choose Ping 24 with transparency. That's a full transparency, full alpha channel. Choose Save, and save it on my desktop as button. Then I'm going to do the same for the down layer. This time I'm going to save it as down. I'll do the same for the over layer. This time we save it as over. And I'll do the same for the disabled layer. Disabled. Okay, let's go ahead and construct our button. That's it for our button images. We can get rid of Adobe Photoshop now, and we can go ahead into AutoPlay Media Studio. We've got a blank project, and go to Tools, Button Maker, and that'll launch our Button Maker object, or Button Maker tool rather. So I'm going to get rid of AutoPlay Media Studio, and so I've just got our Button Maker open here, kind of minimized so I can see the desktop, and I've got our button images here. So I can drag and drop these images over here into our images pool here, or our images pane if you like, in the lower left. Now I'll maximize our application again so we can see what we're doing. Now we've got to drag these images into these 6 panes to create the functionality of our button. I'm going to start by dragging our disabled one into the lower right hand one. That automatically fills all 6 panes with the disabled object, and we just have to go and drag over top of these in the appropriate panes. First thing we'll do is take the button ping and put it in the upper left hand corner. The next thing we'll do is put the over ping in the upper center, and then we'll put the down ping in both the lower left hand corner and the lower center panes. Now as you can see, our button is finished. If you go to the preview pane here and mouse over it, it's perfect. The only thing that we have to do here is tweak the text a little bit, but the button itself is finished and it's functioning perfectly. Okay, let's go into our properties pane now. As you can see, you've got a variety of different options here. You can set up copyright information, web links for the author of the button, and so forth. These are particularly handy if you're going to be creating a lot of buttons or distributing buttons. We'll leave the type set to standard for now, since this is a standard button, and I'm just going to leave the copyright information blank. The hit threshold, however, we're going to take a quick look at. You'll notice that when you mouse over the button in the preview pane, it only reacts once you're over top of the button. If you're over the shadow, you don't actually activate the button. Well, that's the hit threshold, and that's important. That's what makes buttons realistic, and that's why AutoPlay Media Studio buttons are so special, especially compared to buttons, say, from programs like Flash and whatnot, where you have that well-defined hit area and you can't really go beyond that with a shadow and whatnot. Not automatically like this anyhow. So 200 is the default hit threshold, and it works perfect for most buttons, as you can see as it works here. But you can go through and experiment with different types of transparency for different types of buttons and get different sort of functionality set up there. For example, if you have a thicker shadow and you want to set the threshold to be a little bit different. So go ahead and play through with that when you need to. The main thing is that it can allow you to set up a button where the hit threshold is equal to just the most core portion of the button, the most opaque portion of the button. Okay, so I encourage you to experiment with that. Now the text is pretty self-explanatory. You can set the text and the font here. We'll go ahead and leave this font. It's a pretty good font by default, but you can choose different fonts, different sizes and whatnot by clicking on this ellipsis and working with this font dialog. You can also set your default text here to something other than click here. We're going to leave it at click here. This part here is pretty important because, as you can see, our button is somewhat offset by the drop shadow that we have in there, and so in the button images, the button is sort of towards the upper left, and that's why our caption is dropped down below like that. So we have to go to the center Y portion here and actually click on it and watch in the left panes there until our click here text gets to the center of the button. There we go, that's perfect. Let's go ahead and take one off the center X. Actually, it was pretty good. There we go. We'll just leave it like that. And that centers our text by default. And so as we're dragging this button into projects, for example, that's where the text is going to be set up by default. And you can just go ahead and tweak the text. It only takes a couple seconds. Okay, in our different states here, you can actually tweak your images here, of course, by using this little pull-down thing here. And you can also change the image, or the font color rather, in these font areas. We're going to leave ours set to white, but for example, if you wanted to change it, you could change the up text to yellow and the up highlight text to red, for example, and you would see it live here in the preview area. I encourage you to go through and fool around and see which settings work best for you. We're going to leave ours set to white. So there we go, our button's done, it's ready, it's quite professional, and we're ready to use it in a project. So how do we do that? We go to our File, Save As area here, or click on our Save icon, that's the disk icon here, and then we save our button. I'm going to go ahead and name this button just plain old button. We'll go ahead and close down our button maker tool, and you'll see there's another file here called button.btn sitting here on our desktop. And we can go ahead and use that button now in an AutoPlay Media Studio project. I'm going to go ahead and delete these images now since we don't need them anymore, and leave our button on there, and we'll go on to the next video tutorial where we're going to create a toggle button. This was a standard button. Now we'll create a two-state toggle button.